All right. Well, starting a bit late and running around just a little bit tonight, but thank you for being here. Everyone that's here and involved, I appreciate your presence and may need to lean on you just a little bit more than normal because it looks like we've got a few folks that might have come in and seen that they weren't able to get on immediately, so they may be checking back. All right. Well, we're going to have a word of prayer and off we go as we bring our lesson to a close in the parables, grasping the eternal, lesson number 7 tonight. So let's pray together. Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening and thank you for the technology that allows us to be together. We do thank you for your word and for the power of it. We just would ask, Lord, that your help would be with us this evening as we study and as we go through what we've already studied. I know that many have done the reading and prepared for this evening. And so I just pray that you would speak through them as well as to them. And God, that each and every one of us would just leave here richer because we've spent time together and time around your word. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, here we are in Parables, the talents that we're going to be studying tonight. And also we're going to take some time to wrap up a little bit those things that we have studied. This is where we are and what we're going to be going through. Let's begin with our review. And it will be just a little bit, one or two extra questions here because of where we've been. And tonight being the last time that we gather around parables. A parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And in the gospel accounts, Jesus told about how many. Is it A, B, C, or D? About 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 25 to 40, or about 100? Is it A, B, C, or D? You guys remember?
C.
That is correct. It is C. It's right at about 25 of the more fully formed parables. It is about 40 of those that include just the quick statements that we talk about. And you can find you a list here of the parables that are in the Bible on thecharaproject.org. And if you'd like to be kind of studying on some of that, feel free. Now, in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13 has how many parables? Is it 8, 6, 4, or 2? In the Gospel of Matthew, that's what we studied last week. Do you remember? 8, 6, 4, or 2? Anybody? Now, don't be going to Google now.
It's 8.
That is right. It is 8. We talked about it as the parable of the sower, the weeds, the mustard seed, the leaven or the yeast, the hidden treasure, the pearl of great price, the parable of the net, and the parable of the owner of the house. And there are a lot of parables in Matthew chapter 13. We called it the short stories of the kingdom. And you can also go a little deeper on these two different things. You've got the videos in the U version, and then you've also got the Chara project that we talked about, as well as the Parables book by John MacArthur, which is great. And I'll be referencing some of that you can study if you'd like to go a little deeper. And don't forget, there are only 7 parables in total that are in all 3 synoptic gospels. And some of these are literally just the very quick hit, 1 or 2 sentence parables. And then these here that are noted with this darker arrow, 4 of them are kind of the more fully developed parables, but there's not a ton that show up in every single one of the synoptic gospels. So we're studying some important things, but they're all throughout the Bible. So we talked about the acronym of MASS, M-A-S-S, which stands for what? You remember?
Main point.
The main point. What does the A stand for? Frank, I feel like you and Roseanne could just do all of this one all on your own here. Main point and audience. What is the first S?
Settings.
The setting. And then the final S is the
surprise.
Very good. That is correct. It is these 4 different sections that you can kind of look at if you're looking to make sure you understand what the parable means and kind of grasp its most important meaning. Now, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, using that MASS method, what is the surprise at the end of the story? Is the surprise that the beaten man was being ignored by a priest, being ignored by a Levite, being saved by a Samaritan man, who he hated, I should say, and then being saved by a Jewish man who disliked him. What is the correct one here? And I know I kind of mistakenly wrote this. It should say being saved by a Samaritan man who knew he hated him. What is the correct answer? A, B, C, or D? Do you remember? What is the big surprise of the parable of the Good Samaritan? I tell you what, I'm going to give you the answer because it was a little screwed up with my wording there, but he was being saved by a Samaritan man who knew that that Jewish man hated him. So I kind of blew my own question there. I've seen teachers do that all throughout my career, and I just did it. So there you go. All right. In the parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son, what best describes the full story of all three of these lost things? Is it something lost and seeking? Is it something lost, seeking, finding, and rejoicing? Is it something lost, seeking, and finding? Or is something found and then fixing holes in the fences and purses? What is the correct answer there? A, B, C, or D? Anyone?
B.
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 Did you say D?
B.
Oh, I thought you said D.
B. Something lost, seeking,
Yeah.
finding, and also rejoicing. All of these are included in that. And then in the parable of the prodigal or lost son, using that mass method one more time, what's the surprise at the end of the story? Is it A, the younger son's courage to ask for his money early? Is it B, the father's negligence in never giving the older son a party? Is it C, the younger son deciding to come home? Or is it D, the older son who never left home but left the father's heart? What is the surprise at the end of the story? Is it A, B, C, or D? Anyone?
D.
D.
D, the older son who never left home but left the father's heart is the biggest surprise. And here tonight, we are moving into the parable of the talents and the wrap up of the story. And here's where we've been. Man, if you can believe it, we are already right here in our 7th of 7 weeks. So let's talk about your favorites and your observations from the pre-reading. I'd love to hear from you. This is always the best part whenever I hear from you. And by the way, I know a lot of you guys don't have your video on, and that's okay. But if you can, get prepared, because at the end, I'm going to be asking you guys the question of what part of these lessons stood out the most to you? What was your favorite parable that we did study? And I'm going to need a lot of you guys to kind of participate in that answer. So it will be a little bit more than just simply me putting a wrap up on it. I'd love to hear from you. So let's hear. Your reading assignment was Matthew 25:14-30, the parable of the talents. Do any of you guys have a favorite part there where this particular passage really spoke to you that you'd like to share? Is there anyone? Anyone?
Okay. I did 15,
Okay.
which says, I can't read, let me see. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. So I said, God gives us resources according to our abilities. And then it's our responsibility to use the talents and the resources that God gives us to do his work. And it's not how much you have, it's what you do with it.
Yeah, awesome. That's very good. And I don't really have a ton to add to that. I think you are dead on the parable there, because I think for most of us in our world, we get all wrapped up in what we do or don't have, right? We feel good about ourselves if we've got more than others. We feel bad about ourselves if we don't have as much as others. But very few of us are just purely focused on being faithful with what we actually have been entrusted. And that's the whole point of this parable, isn't it? Don't be comparing yourself to other people. Just simply be faithful and don't offer reasons why you're not being faithful. Great stuff. Very good. Anyone else, someone else want to throw in their 2 cents on what you see here in this parable, your pre-reading observations or anything like that? Anyone?
I wrote down, God wants us to be good stewards of everything that we do and what he has given us. And we're to take care of what God has blessed you with so that we can bless others.
Yes, that is very good as well. And if I were a guy who did slogans, and I do, yes, I would say you are blessed to be a blessing, right? Where it's not just simply that you do the best that you can with what God has given you financially, time-wise, talent and ability and that kind of thing. And we're going to talk about the difference between talent and talents as we talked about this weight measurement coming up. But ultimately, whatever we have, we are responsible for. And whatever we've been blessed in, we need to turn around and be a blessing outward. We need to be a conduit that receives and then exports those things that God has given to us, not just simply to receive and hold, right? And so there's really some great observation there, Frank. Very good. All right. Anyone else? If you'd like to jump in, audio only is fine. Feel free if you'd like. Anyone? I got somebody here and I'm going to read this. It says, Monica says, what I learned from the passage was the verses, every unfruitful tree shall be cut down. God said to be fruitful and multiply, not just children, but in every blessing and gift. And that's a great point, Monica. They're very good. I like what you said there. And I think it's not just simply to be fruitful and multiply only in having children, but also, as you said, in every gift that you've been given, be fruitful with that and multiply that. Very good. Good observation. All right. I'm going to give you one more shot. If there's anybody who wants to throw in their 2 cents, or if you'd like to later, that's okay. Anyone?
I would like to point out the heart conditions of the servants here.
Yeah.
The first two, they knew the heart of their master, and when they were given the job, they just went and did whatever the master has entrusted them with. They knew their master. But when we come to the third one, he's a foolish servant with all his excuses of laziness and everything. He should have repented for not being fruitful, but instead he was pointing out to his master, saying that you are a hard man, and I know that you will go and gather where you haven't scattered the seed, and you are such a man, so here is what belongs to you, keep it with yourself, and all that kind of stuff. That is really a hard-hearted person over there. And the master again told him, if you couldn't have done that, you would have invested that money in the bank at least. You would have got some interest. I mean, master was so kind, and he was really wanted them to know who he is actually. But this guy, like a foolish man, he never understood his master's heart.
Very good and a great observation. And I think that lays the groundwork for something that we're going to learn a little later in the parable as we go a little deeper in this parable. But you are right. He was given a great responsibility and a great opportunity. And instead of making the best of it, he was lazy and then turned around and tried to blame the master. And the question here is like, exactly what were you thinking? And even in the parable, you can almost hear Jesus in this story saying, your own words turn around and condemn you, right? If you knew I was such a hard man, what made you think you could come and talk to me in this way, that I'd be satisfied with what you were bringing, which you already knew you were bringing if you buried it in the ground? And so there's a lot to say there and a lot of insight, but there is definitely something very clear about the laziness of that last servant, which is sad. It's not what God wanted, but it's not what the master wanted, but it's what he got. And interesting stuff for sure. All right. Well, let's keep moving on the context and the parable itself as we read through it. And let's talk about the context first, and then we'll read through it. We'll talk about the mass, and then we'll talk about how we apply this parable. So this happens after the parable in chapter 26. When Jesus had finished all of these sayings, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." What does that tell us? It tells us that this parable, right after this parable is told, he says, basically, I'm going to be betrayed in 2 days. So we know that this is one of the very final things that Jesus says, and one of the very final things that he speaks about while he's still alive. And then we also notice here in the parable of the 10 virgins, as we begin Matthew 25, then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. The kingdom of heaven. Remember last week when we talked about Matthew chapter 13 and how over and over and over again, the Lord said in his parables, and the kingdom of heaven is like, and then again, he told them another parable saying the kingdom of heaven will be like, and again, the kingdom of heaven is like, right? And so we know that in many ways, this is similar to some of the upside down kingdom that we talked about last week, like the parable of the weeds and the parable of the net, which had a little bit of a end time view to it. Do you remember? Where he said, "Didn't you sow good seed in the field?" And he says, "Yeah, I sowed good seed in the field for sure." Well, let's see here. There I am in the light. But he said, that's not the problem. The problem is that the enemy has come in and sown other seed. And when he did, he, sowed bad seed. And so just let it all grow together. And at the end, when the harvest time comes, we'll separate the good from the bad. And same with the parable of the net. Good fish and the bad fish. The good fish kept, the bad fish turned away and put it in a whole nother barrel. So both were speaking of the end times. This is a kingdom parable to a degree, and it's also speaking of the end time and the final judgment. And you can check this out if you kind of want to follow along here. Matthew chapter 21 is the triumphal entry. That's the Sunday of the last week of Jesus's life. And then chapter 26 says, you know that after 2 days, the Passover is coming. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed. So sometime between Sunday and probably roughly Wednesday is when this parable of the talents is being told to the disciples. And if you fill it all in, you can see here, Matthew 24, the temple of destruction is foretold, the signs of the end of the age, the coming of the Son of Man, the day and the hour of the coming of the Son of Man unknown, and then 3 parables in a row. Stop me if you've heard this one before in Luke 15, right? This parable, followed by this parable, followed by this parable, all with the same theme. The lost coin, the lost sheep, and then the lost or prodigal what? Son, right? And then you see this one with the same theme, with these 3 different parables back to back to back, all with the same theme. And so we kind of get a sense of what's going on here. And then this is the context of Matthew chapter 25. Jesus leaves the temple. He's going away. His disciples come to him and point out the buildings of the temple. And he answered them, you see all of these, do you not? And truly I say to you, there will not be one left here, one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, this is important, Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things be? And what will the sign be of your coming and of the end of the age? And then Jesus answered them. This flows directly into Matthew chapter 25. There is an uninterrupted break of Jesus's words in what is called the Olivet Discourse, because he's on the Mount of Olives, right? So as he sits there with his disciples, they say, hey, Lord, what's going to happen as we kind of come to the end of time? What is that going to look like? And Jesus gives them what is called the Olivet Discourse. And that's very, very important. That is where we are. And this is very important before I turn it over to Kirthi to read for us. This is very, very important. Whenever we talk about the parable of the talents, whenever I say America's Got Talent, or, oh man, that person's really got a talent. Everything that we have within us thinks about they do something very, very well. But in this story, a talent is not a coin. It is not currency. It was a measurement of what? Weight. So a Greek talent would have weighed 60 pounds. A Roman talent would have weighed about 70 pounds. And a Babylonian talent was slightly less than that Roman talent. So it's real hard for us to grasp whenever it says he gave him 5 talents. He was really a good singer. He was a really good, actor. He was, no, it's none of those kinds of talents. Talent had to do with the weight of measurement, and we'll talk more about that. But as we read that, understand whatever the master gave, he gave in a very, very large quantity. Okay. Now, if you decide to give me 70 pounds of food, you've given me a large quantity of food. That's enough for me for weeks and weeks, correct? If you give me 70 pounds of silver, you have given me an absolute fortune. If you give me 70 pounds of gold, you have made me independently wealthy.
Rich.
Right? If you give me 5 of those 70-pound units, how incredibly wealthy have you made me? If you give me 2, how incredibly wealthy. And if you even give me 1, you have made me a rich, rich man. So this is very important as we talk about the parable of the talents. Okay. All right. So any thoughts, questions, or comments before we turn it over and allow Kirthi to read this parable to us? Anyone? Okay. So Kirthi, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to get on the right slide and I'm going to let you go to it. Okay. Here we go.
Matthew 25:14-30, the parable of the talents. For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled amounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents here. I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents here. I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have and gather where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I should have received what was my own with interest. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kirti. Sorry to glitch you there a little bit. You did really good. All right. Is there anything that jumps out to any of you as you read this passage or hear this passage read? A word, a phrase, something unusual that you hear that you want to make mention of? Anyone?
Well, 30 where it says, and throw the worthless servant outside, well, we don't want to be that worthless servant.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the weeping and gnashing of teeth idea, this is Jesus's way of saying, cast them into outer darkness, cast them out of my presence forever. And of course, we don't love to talk about hell, but Jesus does speak about hell. He does talk about an eternal separation from God whenever people who have made their choice to live their life apart from God all of their life, eventually eternity will give them exactly what they wanted. They didn't want God in their life. They're going to get an eternity of that, and that will be a terrible thing, and no chances to make a different choice, unfortunately. But yeah, that's a rough one. That's a hard one to think about and a difficult thing to see. But it is important to know and just be honest that, hey, where Jesus is speaking here, he isn't just saying, bad business decision, I guess I shouldn't have done that. He said, no, your wickedness and your slothfulness and your laziness where it comes to the things of God are going to take you to a place where you don't want to be. And that is a good way of reminding us that there is no such thing as making no decision about God. You have made a decision if you make no decision, right? That's exactly what happened with this servant. As much as we don't want to think about it, making no decision is making a decision. That is true in our lives everywhere, and it is also true in our lives spiritually speaking. So, yeah, it's good. All right, anyone else? Anything else that jumps out to you in this passage? Anyone? Okay, so let's talk about the mass of the parable of the talents real quick. And as I've shared with you, we didn't do this last week because we had 8 of them that we were covering. So we didn't have time to do that. But let's talk about the mass of the parable of the talents, and then we'll go a little deeper on that parable. So your words don't have to be perfect, but get them, kind of say, well, this is kind of what it is, and I'll show you what I wrote. You don't have to guess perfectly to be right here. So just if you'll kind of work with me on this, let's talk about it. What is the main point of the parable of the talents here? Can you guys think about what the main point is? Like I said, doesn't have to be perfectly worded like mine. Not that mine is perfectly worded, but doesn't have to be word for word what I wrote down for it to be the right answer. What do you think the main point of the parable of the talents is? Anyone? Anyone want to venture a guess?
Be faithful for what you have been entrusted with, no matter in comparison with others,
Very
according
good.
to your ability.
So I wrote it down as Christ will return. So be ready, be faithful, and be fruitful. But I think that's exactly what you're saying. What you've been entrusted with, be faithful to that. Be faithful and be fruitful. I think that is what you were saying, Kirti. That is good. Who is the audience? We talked about it. This is the Olivet Discourse. And the audience was a very select group of men. Who was that? You remember? We talked about these men asking, when will we know that the sign of your coming is, and what are going to be the signs of the last times? Who was that? I heard it.
Disciples.
Yep, it was Jesus's disciples that he was asking. And what was that setting? We talked about that. We talked about when this happened. You remember?
2 days before Jesus is going to
Just a handful of days. That's right. It's Jesus's final week. It's his final days. He's teaching about Judgment Day, about the final. And the surprise, I think there was a mild surprise here, but here's what I wrote. And rather than, kind of, I'll tell you what I thought. I thought that it was a bit surprising that the master rewards fruitfulness. I think we all knew that, but I think that he punishes laziness and is not satisfied that we would be lazy and offer excuses was a little bit of a surprise, if that makes sense. I think what he's saying is, look, I'm not here just to simply pat you on the head and give you a participation trophy, right? You have to come to me. You have to make me a part of your life. You have to seek first this kingdom and its righteousness, and all these things will then be added to you. So I think that's a little bit of the surprise in that final S. Some surprises are a little bit more, pow. This one is a little bit less so, but I think that is a good way to know the parables. All right, so let's talk about going deeper. And I'll share with you a lot of what I'm going to share here is found in the book by John MacArthur, and it is so good. As I've shared with you, great book. If you're interested, you can listen on Audible. You can rent that, buy that, whatever it might be. But there's a lot of parables that he tackles that are really good. He does talk about this particular one. He says that Matthew's gospel is bookended by two of the longest, nearly uninterrupted discourses that Jesus shares while on earth. One is the Sermon on the Mount. That's at the beginning of Jesus's ministry. It's the 3 chapters of Matthew chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7. But then at the last of his ministry, the second lesser known block of teaching is called the Olivet Discourse, because it happens on the Mount of Olives with his disciples. And it's found in Matthew 24 through 25. If you notice all the red letters, there's 92 verses in a row that are all red letters, beginning in Matthew chapter 24, 4b, going all the way through Matthew 25, 46. That Olivet Discourse speaks directly about the end times, including 3 parables back to back to back. And so we shared, this is kind of the idea of what the Olivet Discourse was all about, and it's captured here. And then again, we said a talent is not a coin or currency. It is a weight of measurement. We talked about how wealthy a person would be if they'd been given a talent. The talent would have been probably, according to MacArthur, of gold or silver. And I agree with him. And so even a single talent would have been an immense fortune. And so as you look at it, I don't know if you, like me, you have the modern mindset. You say, well, he gave 5 to one, and then he gave 2 to another, and then he gave 1 to another. I mean, I really would like to be the 5 talent servant, rather than the 1 talent servant. But the truth is that he was incredibly generous to all of them. Whether you were a 1 talent servant, a 2, or a 5, you got a lot of money entrusted into your care and your concern. And so this is a big deal. They were given an immense fortune, and they were required to be faithful over that fortune. That's a big deal. And real quickly, the master in this parable is not some small businessman. With the amounts that he was likely giving, is what we would call a highly successful international entrepreneur. I mean, he was very, very, very wealthy. He was not doing these things as a charity case. He was making business investments. And when he made those investments in these men, he expected a return. And he said, I will come back. And that's what he did. And when he did, he found that some had been faithful and some had not. So here's some important questions. And I want you and I to go deeper on the parable of the talents. And this is where I need you to participate with me, because I can teach, but if you are interested in putting in, it will be more important and more interesting for sure. But let me ask you this question. Was the master being unfair when he invested only 5 talents in one manager, only 2 talents in one, and 1 talent in his other managers? Was he being unfair? Mhm.
Well, I believe every master knows the strengths of the apprentices.
Yeah.
I believe he knew what each of them could accomplish, and he knew what character each one of them had. But he didn't expect the last one with the one talent to not even put in an effort.
Monica, I think you nailed it. If you don't pay special attention, you will miss the line in the passage that Kirti read and that you guys may have read, where it said he gave to one 5, to one 2, and to one talent, each according to their own ability.
Yes.
Now, here's what I would tell you. This was a snapshot. This was not a permanent decision. The 5-talent servant might be a 10-talent servant in a couple of years. The 2-talent servant might be a 5-talent servant in a couple of years. The 1-talent servant had the ability to be a 2 or 3 or 4-talent servant, but he showed himself to not even be capable of giving full account for the 1 talent that he was given. And so this is important for us. Again, I say, most of us in our modern world are so worried about figuring out if we're on the top of the heap that we're just not even faithful with what we've been given. And for most of us, what we need to do is we need to stop worrying about what others have that we don't, and just simply put our head down and work our tails off to be fruitful with what God has already given us. Most of us live far beneath what God has enabled us to live, not because he is not invested wisely, but because we're so busy battling a battle among the other managers rather than making the investments that we should be making. And I think that's a really important part of the parable of talents here. We can lose ourselves in, oh, I'm so upset, I'm not a 5-talent servant. It's like, well, if you were a really good 1-talent servant, the next time that the master leaves, he won't be leaving you 1 talent. He'll show that you're faithful, and then you'll get 2 or 3 or maybe 5, who knows? But I believe with all my heart that if the 5-talent servant had said, here's your 1 talent that I made on top of my 5, that he'd have been very angry with that servant. Say, I invested 5 talents in you. This is far below and beneath what you should have done. And I think we're going to be held accountable before God, not for what we don't have, but for what we did with what we did have, if that makes sense. So I talked a lot after Monica's correct answer. So let's keep moving. All right. Thank you, Monica. Very good answer as well. So what was the master's mood after hearing that the 2-talent manager had made only 2 talents with the original 2-talent investment? Was he angry or was he pleased? Think about it. Which one? Was he angry or was he pleased? It's not a trick question. He was pleased. He was pleased. Why was he pleased? Because he was not requiring the 2-talent manager to live up to what the 5-talent manager had been given. He just wanted him to be faithful with what he'd been given, right? And so ultimately, that's what we just talked about. He's not asking more of you than you are capable of giving. And he knows what you're capable of in the way that he entrusts it in the first place. It's a powerful statement and a powerful lesson to learn. All right. So let me ask you this. These two kind of go hand in hand. So I'm going to ask them both and y'all can react in however way you want. Do you believe that the master would have been happy with a 5-talent manager if he'd only made a 1-talent gain? And do you believe that the master would have been unhappy with a 1-talent manager if he'd only made a 1-talent gain? I mean, what are your thoughts here? What do you think about these questions or the principle behind these questions? Anyone?
I think the master was first of all after profits. He would have been pleased, but he would not have been pleased as much as he was because he had expectations. even though his expectations were, even though the one with the 5 talents didn't meet up to his expectations, he wouldn't have been sad as much as he was with the one with the 1 talent.
Yes. I think that I believe what you're saying, Monica, is right. And I agree with his expectations fell directly in line with what he knew he had invested it initially and what they were capable of producing. And here's the truth. We can fool other people. We can fool ourselves, but we will not fool God.
That's right.
He knows what we've been given. He knows what we're capable of, and he knows what we ought to do with what we've been given. And so I feel it is my responsibility to talk about somebody who has been given something, whether that's opportunity, whether that's wealth, whether that is talent in the way that we understand talent in 2024, whether that is intelligence, whether that is a platform, fame, power, opportunity to make a difference, or whatever it is. All of those are things that God can give and can provide. And he knows what we're capable of doing with those things. I believe that every single one of the things that we have within our hands, within our toolbox personally, are not only a responsibility, but also a blessing. We think about, oh, it's such a blessing to have that. Well, here's what I would say. It is a blessing, there's no doubt, but it is also an obligation. It is also an obligation because he will reward faithfulness, but he will also punish laziness, slothfulness, and a disregard for doing the best that you can with what you've been given. And so that's important to know. I think it's just important to know. That's what he's teaching us here in this parable. All right. Questions, thoughts, or comments before we kind of keep moving? Anyone have anything to say? Anything to share? Going once, going. Yes,
yeah.
please.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I keep thinking if the thing happening in this passage where the master got angry with the one he gave 1 talent that went and buried it without yielding anything in a bank to get small interest. I keep thinking if it is what is happening in the world that make like rich people, they keep getting richer. And instead of the poor people to like come up a little bit to at least middle class, they keep getting poorer. So
Yeah.
just what I think in my mind, that they disturb me all the time.
Well, there's no doubt that the rich and the poor divide keeps getting a little larger. And I think there is something to that for sure. And I do think that the Lord does want us to be wise. If you do not understand and do not know about money, but yet you have opportunities to earn, then it probably makes a lot of sense for all of us in light of this parable to say, well, okay, so I have an opportunity. Now that I have that opportunity, what does that need to look like as I go forward? And if you are blessed, as Promise is mentioning, don't forget that, look, hey, I'm going to tell you, if I won the lottery and won multiple tens of millions of dollars, I can promise you I won't own a yacht. You know why? Because owning a yacht, while there are people that are in need in this world, to me seems a little crazy. I apologize to the 3 of you on this call tonight that own a 30-foot yacht or more. I apologize. This is not meant to be, specifically aimed at you guys, but God bless you. I'm kidding. All right. Well, but I would just say, like, ultimately what we're responsible for is being a blessing as well, and doing the best that we have so that we do multiply that money, but then that we also are that conduit. So, yes, very good. And Monica also mentioned in the chat, said that the Lord did kind of convey to us that he's not going to let us bite off more than we can chew. And that is the New Texas version, if I ever heard the New Texas version. But you are right. The Lord is out there trying to make sure that we don't get ourselves in more deep water than we can swim in, so to speak. So good stuff. All right, let's talk about a recap, overview, and some big takeaways. As Jesus nears the end of his life on earth, he gives the Olivet Discourse to his disciples. He does so with 3 parables, all with an end time theme. And Jesus tells his disciples that his departure is near, but that it's not unexpected. That's important, right? Hey, it's close, but it's not catching me by surprise. Don't let it catch you by surprise either. And then he also is leaving them with some very clear expectations as well. This parable given to his disciples lets them know, I'm going to be coming back and you are going to give an account for the opportunity that you have been given. And then thirdly, in the parable of the talents, the master comes back expecting fruitfulness for his investments in his servants. The master rewards faithfulness, but punishes unfaithfulness. And those are important things. Okay, so I tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to just tell you right off the bat, we are just about done. But before we end it all and kind of close down the idea of grasping the eternal from parables, I want to share a little bit about where we've been. And I give myself a high five up here. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but I was doing this and it's like, oh, hand raised and all that crazy stuff. It's just not going to go away because I can't take the time. But let's talk about where we've been a little bit, and maybe you might have some insight and some input on things. Do you have a favorite parable that we studied in this teaching series? Which one and why? So we talked about the intro of the parables, the parable of the Good Samaritan, the parable of the sower, the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin, or the parable of the prodigal son, or the short stories of the kingdom, or the parable of the talents as we talk about tonight. So do any of you guys have a favorite parable that we've studied in this teaching series? Which one was it? And maybe if you've got a minute, you can tell me why. Anyone?
Mine is the parable of the lost sheep. I mean the son that asked the father to give him whatever that is his share, and he left the house. He went to far place, he squandered it, and then he got a time he couldn't manage. He has nothing left. Probably he wasted that money in women or in a useless way. He didn't even make good use of it. So, and then he remembered to come back to the father.
You like the parable of the lost or prodigal son? That was your favorite?
Yeah, the prodigal son.
Very good.
So,
all right.
What I like about it is it's reminding me that every one of us in one time or the other must have walked away from God. Yeah. Walk away, forget thinking things of God. You really want to enjoy your time. Like when we were small, when our mates were going to, parties, discos, to dance, to enjoy themselves, we wanted to go, but my father is always holding us back. So we see that there is better out there than him holding us. We never like him for holding us back. He hated it most. We just be disobedient. Anything he asks us to do, we not do because of not allowing us to go and follow others to enjoy life. But when they have leave you to go and do the enjoy life, and you make so many mistakes, when you go, your father is not happy. Like if we even manage to sneak out, he's not happy. We disobey him. But anytime you come back and you now realize, oh, this thing I did, I don't think is what is good for me.
Yeah.
What my father is telling me has better interest of me in his heart than what I'm thinking the world has for me. When you come back, he will not say, but when I asked you to go, you still left. Oh, go, don't even come back. Go and continue whatever you are doing, continue the life. Never say that. He's always happy to even bring you back, sit you more down, to teach you why he didn't even want to meet you in the first place, and what you will see if you continue the life over there. So I feel that's how God is taking us. No matter everything we have done, all those terrible things, as human beings, we'll be doing it. Human nature is a thing from time of Adam.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but anytime we come back to God, he is happy to receive us back.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is the cornerstone of that parable of the lost son, that the Lord is the one who is welcoming us back. It is human nature to wander, but it is also God's nature to welcome us home, which is awesome. Anyone else? Do you have a favorite parable that jumped out to you, or is one of yours also the parable of the lost son? Anyone? Got just a moment or two more. Anyone? Anyone else? Anyone else have another favorite or a favorite?
I think I'll also will go with the lost and prodigal son, because that parable a few years back, the Lord spoke to me in the condition where I am, and He brought me back to Himself. And the twist of the story, as we have seen, the surprise of the story is we need to check our heart. It may turn like the elder son, though staying back with the father, but the heart might have not been according to the father's heart. That is that's where I have to keep checking and examining myself. Am I with the Lord or no? Am I seeking the Lord at all times or no? And the teaching this Sunday you spoke through the lesson of Rehoboam, where it was clearly said that he did not set his heart upon the Lord as his father David did.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Very good. I appreciate it. I'm right there between two for my favorites. The Good Samaritan is maybe one of my favorite, and then the Prodigal Son is probably my favorite. They're like probably 1A and 1B for me personally. All right. So did you have anything that you learned that stood out? Anything in particular that stood out to you that you particularly learned from our lessons as we studied from the parables? Is there anything that you kind of had that jump out to you? Anyone? I will say that the road that the man was on going to Jericho, that was there so that he could avoid going through Samaria, was one of the things that I learned, and how powerful it was that the Samaritan man helped the man who was on the road just to avoid going through his land. That was powerful to me. So he was helping a man who he knew he was hated by that man that he was helping. And that was incredibly powerful to me personally. Anyone else have something that kind of jumped out to you in any of these stories or any of the things that you learned? Anyone?
Yes, the parable of the talents.
Yes.
I just like when you were explaining earlier that it wasn't necessarily money. I always had it behind my head that it was money.
Yes. Very good. Very good. Anyone else? Another thing that you learned in this parables teaching series before we kind of close it down? Anyone? Get in one more. Anyone?
I think the Good Samaritan, like you said, God loves everyone, and he gives us the ability to love the unlovable and to have the heart to gives us the heart to love people that don't love us, and then they can see the love of God in us. And it weakens the hatred in people, and they see something in you is like the same way that we look at God, because God forgave us of our sin.
That's great. I love what you said there, that it weakens the hatred in other people when we love in that way as God loved. That's great. And I think that's a really good way of putting it in phrase. And I'll probably steal that. And if I forget to credit you, I just want you to know in advance, I'm probably going to steal that because it was really, really good. All right. All right. Well, I've got very quick time for just one more. If you got it, if not, I won't linger. Anyone? One other thing that you learned that really stands out in your mind? Anyone?
Even the parable of sower, in our study, what struck me is we are just sowers, and we need to sow the seeds. We are not the heart transformers. That is the job of God alone.
Yeah.
And only He can water it, and He can only transform the heart. But we are supposed to be faithful and trusted the given word of God to be sown in those hearts. That was very much struck to my heart through this parable study.
Great. That's great. Very good. And I do think that we probably have learned something. Listen, man, I've been at this for forever. I've read these stories for forever. I learned something every single one of these lessons. So I have a feeling that probably all of you learned something. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot to say which one was it that you learned, but I appreciate those of you who did share, and thank you for that. And I hope and pray that you continue to see that you will learn, and that you not only will learn, but you'll gain in knowledge. The whole point of parables is there are at least 25 large stories that Jesus tells, that if you don't really understand the concepts of parables, that, by studying them, you can learn a little bit more and kind of come away with just a little bit more understanding. And so that's why I wanted to teach about parables, because there's a lot of them and they all have some really powerful things. Let's keep going here. We are here. We have finished. This is our 7th week that we study. So we are wrapping it up today on May 22nd. Let's do a couple of big takeaways. Here's tonight's. In Matthew 24 through 25, Jesus shares the Olivet Discourse with his disciples, who inquired about the end of days, also known as Judgment Day. Jesus gives 3 parables back to back, similar to the 3 lost themed parables in Luke 15. 3 parables, all with the same theme. And then Jesus tells these parables to help his disciples and all of his yet to come disciples, that's you and me, that the master will return and will both reward faithfulness and punish unfaithfulness. So we should always be prepared to stand before the Lord no matter when it occurs. The truth is that we, as good and faithful servants, ought to be ready to stand before the Lord no matter what and no matter when that comes. And then I share this with you, the teaching series, Big Takeaway. Throughout his ministry, Jesus, the master teacher, uses parables to help share truths with his hearers. And he shares 25 plus of these full-sized earthly stories with heavenly meanings. He's fulfilling Scripture's prediction, but also giving us amazingly simple stories that are at the same time amazingly deep. And as we, with ears to hear, and then keep on hearing, another thing we learned, we gain more and more insight into the kingdom of heaven. And that's why we've been studying the parables. And it's been a pleasure to study with you. I hope and pray that these have been interesting lessons and exciting lessons and things that you can take away and use in your own Bible study and make things thicker and just more meaningful and richer for you. Just having more heft to the strength of your commitment as well as your understanding of God's word. So thank you guys so much for your time, for your attention. Those of you who are watching later, thanks for being a part of this. We know that it's not just for those who are here tonight, but also for those that are there and sharing later on. So God bless you as well. And God bless you guys that are here tonight. I hope and pray that this has been a blessing, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. I love teaching with you guys and studying with you guys. We'll take a couple weeks off and we'll be back at it again. So watch for the next announcement, and I hope and pray that you'll make a decision that you're going to be involved no matter what it is, because it's not about, oh, this is a great lesson. It's, hey, every lesson is important. So look forward to sharing that with you guys. God bless y'all. Y'all have a great rest of the week, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Okay. All right. Y'all take care. God bless.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks.
Take care. Good night.